The wind howled through the streets of Fairbanks, Alaska, on the morning of January 12, 2017. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blanketing the quiet neighborhood in white silence. It was the kind of morning where most people stayed indoors, where the cold bit through layers of clothing and the world seemed to shrink into itself. But for Claire Thompson, a 32-year-old mother of two, it was just another Thursday, just another school run, just another ordinary day, except it wasn't. By noon, Claire Thompson had vanished without a trace. Her car was found 3 blocks from her home on Birch Street, engine still running, windshield wipers scraping uselessly against the mounting snow. The driver's door hung open. Her purse sat untouched on the passenger seat. Her phone, still unlocked, showed a text message half-typed to her husband. "Dropping kids off. Be home in..." The message was never finished. The Fairbanks Police Department received the call at 1:47 p.m. Mark Thompson, Claire's husband, had returned home from work early to find the house empty. No note, no sign of struggle, just silence. He called her cell repeatedly. No answer. He drove the route she always took to the elementary school. That's when he saw it. Her silver Honda CR-V idling in the middle of the road, exhaust curling into the frozen air. Mark pulled over, his heart hammering in his chest. He approached the car slowly, as if expecting Claire to pop out from behind it, laughing at some misunderstanding. But she wasn't there. The street was empty. The only sound was the hiss of falling snow and the distant rumble of a snowplow 2 blocks over. "Claire?" he called out, his voice swallowed by the storm. Nothing. He checked the car. Her coffee cup sat in the holder, still warm. Her gloves were on the dashboard. Everything about the scene suggested she had just stepped out for a moment, to help someone, to check something, to do whatever small thing had pulled her from the driver's seat. But she never came back. Mark dialed 911 with shaking hands. Within an hour, police had cordoned off the area. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual. But it was a blizzard morning in Fairbanks. People didn't look out their windows. They didn't stand on their porches. They stayed inside, wrapped in warmth and routine. No one had seen Claire Thompson disappear. Detective Sarah Alvarez was assigned to the case. A 14-year veteran of the Fairbanks PD, she had worked missing persons cases before, but this one felt different from the start. The abandoned car, the phone left behind, the half-finished text. It didn't fit the profile of someone running away. It didn't fit the profile of someone who wanted to disappear. "Talk to me about your wife," Detective Alvarez said, sitting across from Mark Thompson in the living room of their modest, 2-story home. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, lights unplugged, ornaments glinting dully in the gray afternoon light. Mark looked hollowed out. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands clasped tightly together. She's everything," he said quietly. "She's a good mom, a good wife. She volunteers at the kids' school. His voice cracked. "She wouldn't just leave. Not like this." "Any problems at home?" Alvarez asked gently. "Arguments? Financial stress?" Mark shook his head. "No. I mean, we're not rich, but we're fine, we're happy. We were planning a trip to Denali this summer. She was excited about it." "Any issues with anyone? Conflicts? Someone bothering her?" "No," Mark said firmly. "Everyone loves Claire. She's kind. She helps people. He stopped, his throat tightening. "You have to find her, please." Detective Alvarez nodded, jotting notes. But even then, a cold knot formed in her gut. She had seen cases like this before. When someone vanished this cleanly, this completely, it usually meant one of 2 things. They didn't want to be found, or someone didn't want them to be found. The first 48 hours were critical. Search teams combed the area around Birch Street, moving through backyards, alleyways, and abandoned buildings. Volunteers from the community joined the effort, their breath fogging in the freezing air as they called Claire's name into the void. Helicopters swept overhead, thermal imaging cameras scanning the snowdrifts for any sign of life. Nothing. The blizzard had erased everything. Footprints, tire tracks, any physical evidence that might have pointed investigators in the right direction. It was all buried under 2 feet of fresh snow. By the 3rd day, the media had picked up the story. Claire's face appeared on local news broadcasts, her smiling photo juxtaposed against grim headlines. "Mother of 2 vanishes in Fairbanks. Search continues for missing woman. Family desperate for answers." Tips began pouring in. A woman matching Claire's description had been seen at a gas station in Anchorage. Another caller claimed to have spotted her at the Canadian border. Someone else insisted they'd seen her hitchhiking on the park's highway. Every lead was followed. Every tip investigated. Every single one led nowhere. As the days turned into weeks, the focus began to shift. Detective Alvarez hated this part of the job, the part where hope started to curdle into suspicion. Statistically, when a woman disappeared, the first person investigators looked at was the husband. Mark Thompson became a person of interest. His phone records were subpoenaed, his finances scrutinized, his movements on the morning of January 12th traced and retraced. He submitted to a polygraph test. He allowed police to search his home, his car, his workplace. Nothing incriminating was found, but the whispers had already started. At the grocery store, at the kids' school, online forums buzzed with speculation. The husband always knows something. He's too calm. Why isn't he more emotional? Mark Thompson's life became a nightmare within a nightmare. Meanwhile, Detective Alvarez kept digging. She interviewed Claire's friends, her co-workers at the dental office where she worked part-time, her family members who lived out of state. Everyone painted the same picture. Claire was dependable, loving, grounded. She had no history of mental illness, no secret debts, no hidden affairs. She was, by all accounts, exactly who she appeared to be. So where did she go? 1 month after Claire's disappearance, the case began to go cold. The search teams were called off. The media moved on to other stories. The tips slowed to a trickle. Detective Alvarez kept the file open on her desk, but new cases piled on top of it. The reality of police work was brutal. Resources were finite, and without new evidence, there was only so much that could be done. Mark Thompson returned to work, moving through his days like a ghost. His children asked about their mother every night. He had no answers to give them. And in a house just 2 doors down from the Thompsons, a man named Gerald Myers watched the news coverage with quiet satisfaction. He was 71 years old, a retired postal worker, a man who shoveled his neighbors' driveways in winter and brought casseroles to newcomers in the summer. Everyone on Birch Street knew Gerald. Everyone liked him. He had even joined the search parties for Claire Thompson, walking through the snow with the rest of the volunteers, calling her name with concern etched across his weathered face. No one suspected him. No one ever would, because Gerald Myers had perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight, and in the hidden compartment of his attic, behind a false wall he had constructed years ago, Claire Thompson lay in the darkness, alive but silent, her world reduced to the sound of her own breathing and the footsteps of a monster above her head. 6 weeks had passed since Claire Thompson disappeared, and Fairbanks had settled into an uneasy rhythm. The missing person posters that once covered every storefront and telephone pole had begun to fade, their edges curling in the relentless cold. The volunteers who had scoured the frozen landscape with such determination had returned to their lives. The news vans had packed up and driven away, but for Detective Sarah Alvarez, the case refused to let go. She sat in her office at the Fairbanks Police Department. The Claire Thompson file spread across her desk like a puzzle with missing pieces. Crime scene photos, witness statements, timeline reconstructions, phone records, bank statements. Everything pointed to a woman who had simply ceased to exist between the moment she dropped her children at school and the moment her husband found her abandoned car. "You need to let this one rest," her partner, Detective Mike Hensley, said from the doorway. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, steam rising from the lids. "You've done everything you can." Alvarez took the offered coffee without looking up. "There's something we're missing, Mike. People don't just vanish. Not like this." "Sometimes they do," Hensley said, settling into the chair across from her. He was 53, with 26 years on the force and the weary pragmatism that came with it. "Sometimes there's no answer. Sometimes people walk away from their lives and never look back." Her kids were 7 and 5, Alvarez said sharply. Her phone was unlocked. Her coffee was still warm. "Does that sound like someone who planned to disappear?" Hensley sipped his coffee. "No, but it doesn't sound like an abduction either. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no ransom demand, no body." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What it sounds like is a woman who saw an opportunity in that blizzard and took it." Alvarez finally looked up, her dark eyes flashing. "You don't believe that." "It doesn't matter what I believe," Hensley said quietly. "Without evidence, without leads, this case is dead in the water. The lieutenant is going to reassign you by the end of the month." Alvarez knew he was right. She had neglected other cases, poured countless unpaid hours into chasing shadows. Her marriage was suffering. Her sleep was non-existent. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Claire Thompson's face in that missing person photo. The warm smile, the intelligent eyes, the woman who by all accounts had everything to live for. "One more week," Alvarez said. "Give me one more week." Hensley sighed. "What are you going to do that you haven't already done?" "Recanvass the neighborhood," Alvarez said, pulling out a map of Birch Street. "We talked to everyone in the immediate area, but what about the people who weren't home? The ones who worked night shifts? The ones who were out of town?" "Sarah, 1 week, Mike." He stood, shaking his head. "You're going to burn out on this job if you keep doing this to yourself." "Maybe," Alvarez said, turning back to her files. "But not today." That afternoon, Detective Alvarez returned to Birch Street. The neighborhood looked different in late February. The snow had been plowed into massive gray banks, and the houses seemed to huddle together against the perpetual twilight of the Alaskan winter. She parked in front of the Thompson residence, where Mark still lived with his children, and began working her way down the street. Most of the doors she knocked on yielded nothing new. The neighbors repeated the same stories they had told before. Yes, Claire was wonderful. No, they hadn't seen anything suspicious. Yes, they hoped she would be found safe. But at house number 247, 2 doors down from the Thompsons, Detective Alvarez met Gerald Myers for the first time. He answered the door with a gentle smile, a cardigan buttoned over a flannel shirt, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Detective," he said warmly, "I've been wondering when you might come by again." "Again?" Alvarez asked, pulling out her notepad. "Oh yes," Gerald said. "I spoke with some of your officers back in January, told them everything I knew, which unfortunately wasn't much. Please come in out of the cold." Alvarez stepped into the tidy living room. It smelled of coffee and old books. Family photos lined the mantel. Gerald with his late wife, who had passed away 3 years prior. Gerald with grown children who lived in the lower 48. Everything about the space spoke of a quiet, solitary life. "I helped with the search parties," Gerald said, settling into an armchair and gesturing for Alvarez to sit on the couch. "Terrible thing what happened to Claire. Such a sweet woman. She used to bring me cookies at Christmas." "Did you see or hear anything unusual on the morning of January 12th? Alvarez asked, going through the motions even though she knew this interview had been conducted before. Gerald shook his head slowly. "I'm afraid not. I was in my workshop in the basement that morning. I build model ships, you see. Helps pass the time. I didn't even know anything was wrong until I saw all the police cars that afternoon." "What time did you go down to your workshop?" "Oh, early. Around 7, I'd say. I like to get started before the day really begins." "And you didn't hear any commotion outside? Any shouting, car doors, anything like that?" "No, Detective. The workshop is fairly soundproof. I insulated it years ago so my late wife wouldn't have to listen to my power tools." He smiled sadly at the memory. Alvarez made notes, though nothing Gerald said raised any flags. He was cooperative, forthcoming, exactly the kind of witness investigators hoped for. "Do you mind if I ask about your relationship with the Thompson family?" "Of course not," Gerald said. "We were neighborly, I suppose. I'd wave to Mark when he left for work. Claire would sometimes ask me to keep an eye on the house when they went on vacation. Good people. I can't imagine what Mark is going through." "What? Have you noticed anyone suspicious in the neighborhood, anyone who didn't belong?" Gerald considered this carefully. "Not really. We get the occasional delivery truck, service vehicles, but nothing out of the ordinary. This is a quiet street, Detective. We look out for each other." "Your house, do you live alone?" "I do, yes. My children are all grown and scattered across the country. It's just me rattling around in this old place now." He gestured around the room. "I keep thinking I should downsize, but there are so many memories here." Alvarez nodded, closing her notepad. "Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Myers. If you think of anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." She handed him her card. "Of course," Gerald said, walking her to the door. "I pray every day that Claire comes home safely." As Detective Alvarez walked back to her car, she felt the familiar frustration settling over her like a weight. Gerald Myers was exactly like every other person on Birch Street, concerned, helpful, and utterly useless to the investigation. She sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the Thompson house. The windows were dark even though it was barely 4 p.m. She wondered if Mark had taken the kids somewhere, trying to escape the ghost of their missing mother. Her phone buzzed. A text from Hensley. "New homicide just came in. Need you." Alvarez started the engine, taking one last look at the quiet street. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that she was missing something. Something obvious. Something that was right in front of her. but she couldn't see it. Not yet. Inside house number 247, Gerald Myers watched through the curtains as the detective's car pulled away. Only when it disappeared around the corner did he allow himself to relax. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, then pulled down the attic ladder with practiced ease. The attic was dark and cold, lit only by a single battery-powered lantern. Gerald moved to the back wall, where a sheet of plywood was mounted flush against the rafters. To anyone else, it would look like part of the original structure. But Gerald knew better. He pressed on a specific point, and the plywood panel swung open on hidden hinges. Behind it was a space roughly 6 feet by 8 feet, insulated and soundproofed. And in that space, huddled beneath a thin blanket, was Claire Thompson. She didn't look up when the panel opened. She had learned months ago that looking up, speaking, resisting, none of it mattered. Gerald would do what he always did: leave a bottle of water, a protein bar, and a bucket to replace the one she had filled. Then he would leave, and the darkness would return. "The detective came by again," Gerald said conversationally, as if they were old friends chatting over tea. "She's very persistent, but don't worry, she doesn't suspect a thing. No one does. No one ever will." Claire remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the rough wooden floor. In the early weeks, she had screamed until her voice gave out. She had thrown herself against the walls until her shoulders were bruised and bloody. She had begged, pleaded, bargained with God and with the monster who had taken her. But Gerald was patient. Gerald was methodical. And slowly, inexorably, Claire had learned that survival meant silence. It meant compliance. It meant disappearing into herself so completely that sometimes she forgot she had ever been anyone else. "I brought you an extra blanket," Gerald said, his voice almost kind. "It's supposed to get down to -20 tonight. Can't have you catching cold." He slid the blanket through the opening along with the water and food. Then he closed the panel, and the darkness swallowed Claire whole once more. Downstairs, Gerald returned to his living room and his model ships. He turned on the television and watched the evening news. There was a story about a missing hiker in Denali, a story about budget cuts at the university, but nothing about Claire Thompson. She had become old news, a sad story that people occasionally remembered but no longer discussed. And that was exactly how Gerald Myers preferred it. March 2017 brought a false spring to Fairbanks. Temperatures climbed into the high 30s, turning the streets into rivers of slush and revealing 3 months' worth of buried debris beneath the melting snow. The longer days should have brought hope, but for Mark Thompson, each sunrise was just another reminder that Claire was still gone. He sat across from Detective Alvarez in an interrogation room at the Fairbanks Police Department. It was the 4th time he'd been called in for questioning, and the warmth in the detective's eyes had been replaced by something harder, more calculating. "Walk me through the morning again," Alvarez said, her pen poised over her notepad. Mark exhaled slowly. "We've been over this a dozen times. Then one more won't hurt." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "I need to understand every detail, Mark. Every minute of that morning." Mark pressed his palms against his eyes. He looked thinner than he had 2 months ago, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. "I woke up at 6. Claire was already up making breakfast for the kids. Pancakes. She always made pancakes on Thursdays. What was her mood? Normal. Happy. She was humming some song from the radio." Mark's voice cracked slightly. "She kissed me goodbye when I left for work at 7:15. That was the last time I saw her." "And you went straight to work?" "Yes. I'm a project manager at Northern Construction. We're building that new medical facility on Airport Way. I was there all morning. You've verified this with my boss, my coworkers, the sign-in logs. What time did Claire usually drop the kids at school?" "Between 8:15 and 8:30. School starts at 8:45. Alvarez made a note. "And you left work early that day. Why?" "I had a dentist appointment at 1 o'clock. It was scheduled weeks in advance. You have the records from the dental office." Mark's frustration was beginning to show. "Detective, I know how this looks. I know statistically the husband is always the first suspect, but I loved my wife. I love my wife." He corrected himself quickly, desperately. Present tense. "She's still alive. She has to be." Alvarez studied him for a long moment. She had interviewed hundreds of suspects over her career, and she had developed an instinct for deception. Mark Thompson was either genuinely devastated or the best actor she had ever encountered. "Your financial records show a withdrawal of $1,500 in cash 3 weeks before Claire disappeared," Alvarez said, changing tactics. "What was that for?" Mark blinked, caught off guard. "What? He thought for a moment. That was for the kids' summer camp deposit. Claire wanted to pay in cash because they gave a discount. Can you prove that? There should be a receipt somewhere. Claire handled that stuff. He paused. Can you check our house? It would be in her office, probably in the file cabinet. Alvarez made another note. Everything Mark said could be verified, would be verified. But verification took time, and with each passing day, the statistical likelihood of finding Claire alive dropped precipitously. Are you having an affair, Mark? The question hit him like a physical blow. What? No. Jesus Christ, no. Claire and I, we were solid. We were happy. Was Claire having an affair? Absolutely not. His voice was firm, certain. She wasn't like that. She would never. How can you be sure? You were at work all day. She was at home, or at the dental office, or running errands. Lots of opportunity. Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. My wife is missing, possibly dead, and you're sitting here accusing her of infidelity. Accusing me of murder? I haven't accused you of anything, Alvarez said calmly. Sit down, Mark. No. His voice shook with anger and grief. I'm done. If you want to talk to me again, it'll be through a lawyer. He walked out, leaving Alvarez alone in the interrogation room. She sat back in her chair, replaying the interview in her mind. Mark's reaction seemed genuine. The grief, the frustration, the indignation. But she had been fooled before. Everyone had secrets. Everyone lied about something. The question was, what was Mark Thompson lying about? Detective Hensley appeared in the doorway. How'd it go? He walked out. Says he wants a lawyer. Alvarez rubbed her temples. I don't know, Mike. My gut says he's clean, but the evidence, or lack thereof, keeps pointing back to him. Maybe because there's nowhere else to point, Hensley said. We've exhausted every lead, no witnesses. No physical evidence, no electronic trail. If Mark did something to her, he did it perfectly. Nobody's perfect, Alvarez muttered. There's always a mistake. Always something. Over the next 3 weeks, the investigation intensified its focus on Mark Thompson. Search warrants were executed on his property, his vehicles, his office. Cadaver dogs were brought in to sweep the Thompson residence and the surrounding area. Digital forensics experts combed through every computer, tablet, and phone in the house. They found nothing. No blood evidence. No signs of violence. No deleted files or suspicious internet searches. Mark Thompson's life was an open book, and every page was exactly what it appeared to be. The community began to split into factions. Some believed Mark was guilty, that he had somehow murdered his wife and hidden the body so well that not even the most experienced investigators could find it. Others defended him, pointing to his obvious grief and the complete lack of evidence. Local forums and social media pages became battlegrounds of accusation and defense. Justice for Claire groups formed, holding candlelight vigils and demanding answers. But their signs were as likely to read "Arrest Mark Thompson" as they were to read "Bring Claire home." Mark stopped going to work. He stopped answering the door. His parents flew in from Seattle to help with the children, who were being shielded as much as possible from the media circus their lives had become. Detective Alvarez watched it all with growing frustration. She was a good investigator. She knew she was. But this case defied every instinct, every strategy she had developed over 14 years of police work. In early April, she made a decision that went against protocol. She drove to Birch Street late one evening, when the spring darkness had settled over the neighborhood. She parked in front of the Thompson house and simply sat there, trying to see the morning of January 12th through Claire's eyes. Claire would have driven this route hundreds of times. 3 blocks to the elementary school. Left on Birch, right on Maple, straight to the school parking lot. A 5-minute drive in good weather, maybe 10 in a blizzard. Alvarez got out of her car and walked the route on foot. The snow had mostly melted, revealing cracked sidewalks and patchy lawns. She passed house after house, each one holding families who claimed to have seen and heard nothing. She stopped at the spot where Claire's car had been found. Nothing about the location seemed significant. It wasn't secluded. It wasn't particularly close to any abandoned buildings or wooded areas. It was just a residential street lined with modest homes and leafless trees. Can I help you, Detective? Alvarez turned to find Gerald Myers standing on his front porch, a cup of tea steaming in his hands. His house was just 30 yards from where she stood. Mr. Myers, Alvarez said, walking toward him. I didn't mean to disturb you. No disturbance at all, Gerald said pleasantly. I saw you standing out there and thought you might like something warm to drink. It's still chilly in the evenings. That's very kind, but I'm fine. Alvarez gestured back toward the spot where she'd been standing. I'm just trying to understand the geography. The timeline. Gerald nodded sympathetically. Still no leads on Claire? Nothing substantial. Such a tragedy, Gerald said, shaking his head. I see Mark occasionally when he comes out to get the mail. He looks like a man who's been hollowed out. I can't imagine what he's going through, especially with all the suspicion. Alvarez studied the older man. You don't think Mark had anything to do with it? Oh, I couldn't possibly say, Gerald said quickly. I don't know the man well enough, but from what I observed, they seemed like a loving couple. Of course, you never really know what goes on behind closed doors, do you? No, Alvarez agreed. You don't. I do hope you find answers, Gerald said. For the children's sake, if nothing else. They deserve to know what happened to their mother. Alvarez thanked him and returned to her car. As she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw Gerald still standing on his porch, watching her leave. There was something about that image, the solitary figure, the lit porch, the watching, that lodged itself in her mind like a splinter, but she couldn't articulate why. By May, the Claire Thompson case had officially gone cold. The active investigation was suspended, though the file remained open. Detective Alvarez was reassigned to other cases, and Mark Thompson was quietly removed from the suspect list due to insufficient evidence. The media moved on. The vigils stopped. The Justice for Claire signs came down. Life in Fairbanks returned to normal, the way it always did after tragedy. People still talked about Claire Thompson occasionally, usually in the context of unsolved mysteries or cautionary tales about the dangers lurking in quiet neighborhoods, but mostly, people forgot. Everyone except Gerald Myers, who climbed the stairs to his attic every morning and every evening, bringing food and water to the woman who no longer remembered how to speak. She had become a ghost in his house, a secret buried so deep that not even the most persistent detective could find her. And in the growing warmth of the Alaskan spring, as the world outside bloomed back to life, Claire Thompson remained frozen in a nightmare that had no end. Time moved differently for Claire Thompson in the darkness of Gerald Myers' attic. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. She had long since stopped counting, stopped trying to hold on to the calendar that had once structured her life. There was only before, when she had been a mother, a wife, a person, and now when she was nothing but a presence in the dark. Gerald had established a routine, and routine was survival. Twice a day he would climb the attic stairs. The creak of the ladder was her only warning, her only measure of time passing. Morning and evening, she assumed, though she had no way to verify. He would open the hidden panel, slide in food and water, remove the waste bucket, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, he would talk. "Good morning, Claire," he would say, his voice conversational, almost cheerful. "Beautiful day outside. The lilacs are blooming early this year." She never responded. In the first weeks, she had screamed herself hoarse. She had begged, pleaded, threatened, bargained. She had thrown herself against the walls until her body was a mass of bruises. But Gerald had simply waited, patient as stone, until her resistance crumbled into exhausted silence. "I saw Mark at the grocery store yesterday," Gerald continued, arranging the new supplies just inside the cramped space. "He's lost weight. Looks terrible, honestly. The children are with his parents most of the time now. Such a shame. They need their father." Claire stared at the wooden floor, her mind retreating to the safe place she had constructed deep inside herself. A place where Gerald's voice couldn't reach. A place where she still existed as something other than a captive. "The investigation has gone cold," Gerald said. "Detective Alvarez, persistent woman, that one. She's been reassigned. No one's looking for you anymore, Claire, not really. You've become a story people tell, a mystery with no solution." He closed the panel, and darkness returned. This was Claire's world now. A 6-by-8-foot cell with a single blanket, a bucket, and the protein bars and water bottles that kept her alive. The space was insulated, soundproofed, invisible. Gerald had planned it meticulously, years before Claire had ever entered his life, because Claire wasn't the first. 2018 bled into 2019. The seasons changed outside the walls of Claire's prison, but inside there was only eternal darkness and cold. Her body had adapted in ways she hadn't thought possible. Her eyes had grown sensitive to the faint strips of light that occasionally seeped through cracks in the panel. Her hearing had sharpened until she could track Gerald's movements throughout the house by the sound of his footsteps. She knew when he was in the kitchen making coffee, when he was in the living room watching television, when he descended to his basement workshop to build his model ships. Every creak, every thump, every distant sound became part of the map she carried in her mind, a map of a house she had only ever seen once, on the day Gerald took her, January 12, 2017, the day that had started like any other. She had dropped the children at school, watching them run through the snow toward the entrance, their backpacks bouncing, their laughter bright in the frozen morning. She had pulled away from the curb, humming along to the radio, thinking about the errands she needed to run. Grocery store, dry cleaning, maybe stop by the bookstore. She'd been meaning to pick up that new thriller everyone was talking about. The blizzard had worsened, snow falling so thick she could barely see 20 feet ahead. She had slowed to a crawl, leaning forward in her seat, squinting through the windshield. That's when she saw him, Gerald Myers, her neighbor, standing in the middle of the road, waving his arms frantically. She had pulled over immediately, her heart racing. Gerald was clutching his chest, his face twisted in apparent pain. A heart attack, she thought. Oh God, he's having a heart attack. She had jumped out of the car, leaving it running, and rushed to his side. Gerald, are you okay? Should I call an ambulance? He had looked at her with such gratitude, such relief. My medication, he gasped, inside my house. Can you help me? Of course she could help. That's what neighbors did. That's what decent people did. She had supported his weight as they stumbled through the snow to his front door. He was heavier than he looked, leaning on her heavily. They made it into the entryway, and she had been reaching for her phone to call 911 when everything went dark. The chloroform-soaked cloth had come from behind, pressed firmly over her mouth and nose. She had struggled, tried to scream, but Gerald's arm was locked around her throat, cutting off her air. The world spun, her vision narrowing to a tunnel, then to nothing. When she woke, she was in the attic. In the dark, in the cell Gerald had built for her. Even now, years later, Claire could feel the ghost of that cloth against her face, smell the sickly sweet chemical odor. It haunted her dreams. On the rare occasions, exhaustion pulled her deep enough into sleep to dream. By 2020, Claire had lost track of how long she had been captive. 3 years? 4? Time had become meaningless. Her body had deteriorated. Her muscles atrophied from lack of movement, her skin pale and papery, her hair long and matted. She suffered from vitamin deficiencies, her gums bleeding, her joints aching constantly. But she was alive. Gerald kept her alive. She didn't understand why. In the early days, she had feared rape, torture, the kinds of horrors she had seen in movies and read about in news articles. But Gerald never touched her. He never hurt her physically. He simply kept her, like a specimen in a jar, preserved and hidden. Do you know what day it is, Claire? Gerald asked one morning, his voice filtering through the panel. It's January 12, 2020. 3 years exactly since you joined me. Happy anniversary. Claire said nothing. She had not spoken in over a year. Her voice had become a distant memory, something that belonged to the woman she used to be. I made pancakes this morning, Gerald continued, in your honor. I remember you telling me once that you made pancakes for your children every Thursday. Such a lovely tradition. He slid a paper plate through the opening. On it were 2 cold, rubbery pancakes and a plastic fork. Eat, Gerald said. You need to keep your strength up. After he closed the panel, Claire stared at the pancakes for a long time. Then mechanically she ate them, because eating meant surviving. And some small, stubborn part of her, the part that still remembered her children's laughter, her husband's smile, the feeling of sunlight on her face, refused to give Gerald the satisfaction of letting her die. The world outside continued without her. Mark Thompson had eventually moved away from Fairbanks, taking the children to start fresh somewhere without the weight of tragedy and suspicion. The house on Birch Street had been sold to a young couple from Anchorage. Detective Alvarez had retired from the force in 2021. The Claire Thompson case, one of the few failures that still kept her up at night. The missing person posters were long gone. The online forums had moved on to newer mysteries. Claire Thompson had become a footnote, a cold case file in a basement archive, a sad story that occasionally surfaced in true crime podcasts. Have you been forgotten? The hosts would speculate. Did Claire Thompson run away from her life? Was she murdered by someone close to her? Or did something more sinister happen on that snowy January morning? If only they knew. If only anyone knew. Gerald Myers continued to be a model citizen. He volunteered at the local library. He donated to charity. He attended neighborhood association meetings and complained about potholes and property taxes like everyone else. He was invisible in his ordinariness, camouflaged by his kindness. In late 2022, Gerald's health began to decline. He was 76 now, his heart weak, his joints arthritic. He moved more slowly through the house, his twice-daily trips to the attic becoming increasingly difficult. Claire noticed the change in his breathing, the longer pauses between his words. "I'm getting old," Gerald told her one evening. "We both are. Look at us. Two relics, hiding away from the world." Claire's hand trembled as she reached for the water bottle he had left. Her fingers were skeletal, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. She was 38 years old and felt ancient. "I've been thinking," Gerald said, "about what happens when I die. Because I will die, Claire. Sooner rather than later, if my doctor is to be believed. And when I do, what happens to you?" For the first time in years, something stirred in Claire's chest. Not hope, she had forgotten what hope felt like, but a question. "Yes, what happens to me? I could let you go," Gerald mused. "Set you free before I pass. But then you'd tell them everything. And I can't have that. My legacy can't be monster. I'm not a monster, Claire. I'm just a man who needed company, who couldn't bear the loneliness after Margaret died." Margaret, his late wife. Claire had seen her photo on the mantel that first day. A kind-faced woman with soft eyes. "You remind me of her," Gerald continued quietly. "The way you used to smile, the way you hummed while you worked. Margaret used to do that. After she died, the house was so quiet, so empty. I couldn't stand it." Claire understood then, in a flash of terrible clarity. She wasn't the first. Before her, there had been others, women who reminded Gerald of his dead wife, women who had disappeared into this same darkness, sustained just enough to survive but never enough to truly live. How many? How many had died here, their bodies disposed of in ways she couldn't bear to imagine? "I'm going to sell the house," Gerald said, his voice decisive. "I've already contacted a realtor. I'll move into one of those assisted living facilities, somewhere with nurses and meal plans and people checking on me twice a day." Claire's heart, that stubborn, beating thing, began to pound. If he sold the house, if someone else moved in, surely they would find her. Surely she would be discovered. "But don't worry," Gerald added, as if reading her thoughts. "I'll make arrangements. Before I leave, I'll seal this space permanently. No one will ever find you, Claire. You'll be my secret, my ghost. And long after I'm gone, you'll still be here, waiting in the dark." The panel closed, and Claire Thompson, for the first time in 6 years, allowed herself to weep. March 2023 brought an unexpected warmth to Fairbanks. The temperature climbed into the mid-40s, and the city emerged from winter like a sleeper waking from a long dream. On Birch Street, a moving truck idled in front of house number 247, its diesel engine rumbling in the quiet afternoon. Gerald Myers supervised the movers with the meticulousness of a man who had spent his entire life organizing, categorizing, controlling. Each box was labeled, each piece of furniture wrapped and tagged. He was moving to North Star Senior Living, a facility on the outskirts of town where his meals would be prepared, his medications managed, his declining health monitored by professionals. "That's the last of it, Mr. Myers," the lead mover said, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the chill. "You need us to do a final walkthrough?" "No, thank you," Gerald said, handing the man a folded $100 bill. "I'll take care of it myself." After the truck pulled away, Gerald stood in the empty living room of the house he had occupied for 33 years. The walls were bare, the floors scuffed and dusty. Ghosts of furniture marked the carpet, darker rectangles where couches and cabinets had protected the fabric from decades of sunlight. He climbed the stairs one final time, his knees protesting each step. In the upstairs hallway, he pulled down the attic ladder and ascended into the familiar darkness. The hidden panel was exactly as he had left it that morning, sealed, silent, invisible. Gerald pressed his hand against the plywood, feeling the faint vibration of breath on the other side. Claire was still alive, still waiting. After 6 years, 2 months, and 8 days, she remained his secret. "Goodbye, Claire," he said softly. "I hope you understand. This was never personal. You were just—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Convenient." He descended the ladder, pushed it back into the ceiling, and left the house for the last time. The realtor had assured him the property would sell quickly. It was a seller's market, and the house was priced competitively. Within 2 weeks, an offer came through. Cash, no contingencies, closing in 30 days. The buyers were a young couple from Seattle, relocating for work. They had a baby on the way and were charmed by the quiet neighborhood and the spacious yard. Gerald signed the papers from his room at North Star, his hand trembling slightly as he transferred ownership of the house, and everything hidden within it, to strangers who would never know what they had purchased. David and Emma Chen moved into 247 Birch Street on April 15, 2023. They were both 31, software engineers working remotely for a tech company based in California. The move to Alaska had been Emma's idea. She had grown up in Anchorage and missed the mountains, the wilderness, the specific quality of northern light. "It needs work," David said, surveying the interior with a critical eye. "But the bones are good. We can make this beautiful." Emma rubbed her swollen belly, now 7 months along. "I love the neighborhood. It feels safe, quiet, perfect for raising kids." They spent the first week unpacking, arranging furniture, planning renovations. The house had good bones, as David said, but it also had quirks, odd angles, outdated wiring, a basement that smelled perpetually of mildew and sawdust. Previous owner was apparently some kind of model ship enthusiast, David said, examining the workshop area in the basement. Left behind a bunch of tools and wood scraps. "As long as he didn't leave behind any bodies," Emma joked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, pregnancy brain. That was dark." David laughed. "I think we're safe, though I should probably check the crawl spaces before the baby comes. Make sure we're not sharing the house with raccoons or squirrels." On April 23rd, 8 days after moving in, Emma was awakened at 3 in the morning by a sound. She lay in bed, her hand resting on her belly, listening. The house was old and prone to settling noises, creaks and groans as the temperature shifted, but this was different. It sounded like tapping, deliberate, rhythmic. "David," she whispered, shaking her husband awake. "Do you hear that?" David surfaced from sleep groggily. "Hear what?" "Listen." They lay in silence. The tapping came again, faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. It seemed to come from above them. "Probably a tree branch hitting the roof," David mumbled, rolling over. "I'll check it in the morning." But in the morning there were no tree branches near the house. David made a note to investigate further but was quickly distracted by a work crisis that consumed most of his day. The tapping continued intermittently over the next week. Sometimes during the day, more often at night. Always from above, always with the same deliberate rhythm. "It's definitely not branches," Emma said on April 30th, standing in the upstairs hallway and staring at the ceiling. "It sounds like it's coming from the attic." "I didn't even know we had an attic," David said. "I thought it was just crawl space." They searched the upstairs and found the outline of the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling. David pulled it down, and a ladder unfolded with a rusty squeal. "When's the last time you think someone went up there?" Emma asked, peering into the darkness above. "Judging by the dust? Decades." David grabbed a flashlight from the utility closet. "I'll take a look. You stay down here. You're not climbing ladders in your condition." He ascended into the attic, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The space was larger than he expected, running the full length of the house. Insulation hung in sagging sheets and cardboard boxes were stacked in the corners, forgotten remnants of previous owners. The tapping had stopped. "See anything?" Emma called from below. "Just junk," David said, sweeping his light across the rafters. "I think we might have mice." Or, he froze. On the back wall, barely visible in the dim light, was a sheet of plywood that looked newer than the rest of the structure. It was mounted flush against the rafters, but the edges didn't quite match the weathered wood surrounding it. David moved closer, his heart beginning to pound for reasons he couldn't articulate. He pressed his ear against the plywood and heard breathing, not animal breathing, human breathing. "Emma," he called down, his voice tight. "Call 911, right now." "What? Why?" "Just do it. Tell them," he swallowed hard. "Tell them we need police. Tell them we think someone's in our house." "David, what are you—" "Now, Emma." The authority in his voice sent her running for her phone. David remained frozen, his ear pressed against the panel, listening to the shallow, ragged breaths on the other side. His mind raced through possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. Someone was living in their attic, hiding, breathing, waiting. He backed toward the ladder, his flashlight beam locked on the plywood panel. "Hello?" he called out, his voice shaking. "Can you hear me? We're getting help. Hold on." The breathing continued, but there was no response. Fairbanks police arrived within 12 minutes. 2 patrol officers, a veteran named Rodriguez and a rookie named Chen, no relation to David, climbed into the attic with flashlights and weapons drawn. "Stand back, sir," Rodriguez said, examining the panel. He knocked on it. "Fairbanks police." If someone's in there, identify yourself. Silence. Rodriguez looked at his partner. Get the pry bar from the car, we're opening this. It took 20 minutes to locate the hidden release mechanism. When the panel finally swung open, the officer's flashlights revealed a nightmare. The space was roughly 6 feet by 8 feet. A single gray blanket lay crumpled in the corner. Empty water bottles were stacked against one wall. A plastic bucket, mercifully empty, sat near the opening. And huddled in the farthest corner, skeletal and pale, her eyes squeezed shut against the sudden light, was a woman. Jesus Christ. Officer Chen breathed. Rodriguez immediately radioed for an ambulance. We need EMTs at 247 Birch Street, urgent. We have a female, approximate age unknown. Appears severely malnourished and dehydrated. Possible captivity situation. He approached slowly, holstering his weapon. Ma'am, can you hear me? You're safe now. We're police officers. We're here to help. The woman didn't respond. She remained curled in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, her breathing shallow and rapid. Ma'am, we need to get you medical attention. Can you tell me your name? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman's lips moved. Her voice was barely a whisper, rusty from disuse. Claire. Rodriguez leaned closer. Claire? Claire what? What's your last name? The woman's eyes opened. Pale blue, distant, haunted. Thompson, she whispered. My name is Claire Thompson. The name hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. He had been a rookie in 2017, fresh out of the academy, when Claire Thompson had disappeared. He had helped with the search parties, knocking on doors, checking abandoned buildings. The case had gone cold, become legend, a cautionary tale told to new recruits. And here she was, 6 years later, alive. Get Detective Alvarez on the phone, Rodriguez barked to his partner. I don't care if she's retired. Find her and tell her we found Claire Thompson. The ambulance arrived and paramedics carefully extracted Claire from the hidden compartment. She weighed 83 pounds. Her muscles had atrophied to the point where she couldn't stand without support. She had multiple vitamin deficiencies, pneumonia, and severe psychological trauma. But she was alive. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Emma Chen stood on the front lawn, her hands pressed against her pregnant belly, tears streaming down her face. We almost didn't check, she said to David, her voice breaking. We almost just ignored the sound. David pulled her close. But we didn't. At North Star Senior Living, Gerald Myers was eating dinner in the communal dining room when his phone buzzed with a news alert. His hand froze halfway to his mouth as he read the headline. Missing woman found alive after 6 years in captivity. The fork clattered to his plate. Around him, other residents looked up, concerned by his sudden pallor. Gerald, are you all right? A nurse asked, hurrying to his side. He struggled to breathe, his heart hammering in his chest. I think I'm having a heart attack. This time he wasn't pretending. Within an hour, police surrounded North Star Senior Living. Gerald Myers, clutching his chest and gasping for breath, was placed under arrest even as paramedics worked to stabilize him. Gerald Myers, you are under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and assault. Detective Maria Santos, Alvarez's former partner, read from her Miranda card. You have the right to remain silent. She was lonely. Gerald gasped, his face gray with pain. After Margaret died, I was so lonely. Claire reminded me. Save it for your lawyer, Santos said coldly. You're going to need a good one. Gerald Myers suffered a massive myocardial infarction in the ambulance. He was pronounced dead at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital at 9:47 p.m., taking most of his secrets to the grave. But Claire Thompson survived. Against all odds, against 6 years of darkness and deprivation and terror, she survived. And finally, after 2,263 days, she saw the sun again. The media descended on Fairbanks like a swarm. Within 24 hours of Claire Thompson's rescue, news vans lined Birch Street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, their reporters doing stand-ups in front of house number 247. The story had everything the 24-hour news cycle craved. A missing person cold case, a dramatic rescue, a deceased villain, and a survivor pulled from unimaginable darkness. Miracle in Alaska, the headlines screamed. Woman found alive after 6 years. The neighbor next door, how Gerald Myers hid his horrific secret. But inside Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, in a private room on the 4th floor, Claire Thompson was oblivious to the circus outside. She lay in bed, tubes and monitors attached to her frail body, her eyes fixed on the window where actual sunlight streamed through the blinds. Dr. Rebecca Foster, the the trauma specialist assigned to Claire's case, had seen many horrors in her 20-year career. But this was something different. Her physical recovery will take months, Dr. Foster told the assembled team of specialists. But the psychological damage, I honestly don't know if she'll ever fully recover from 6 years of that kind of isolation and captivity. Claire had not spoken since arriving at the hospital, despite the gentle encouragement of doctors, nurses, and the police psychologist who had been brought in. She ate only when food was placed directly in front of her. She flinched at sudden sounds. She couldn't tolerate having the door to her room closed. And she wouldn't, talk about what had happened. Sarah Alvarez arrived at the hospital on May 2nd, 3 days after the rescue. She was 62 now, her dark hair shot through with silver, her retirement spent consulting on cold cases and teaching criminal justice courses at the University of Alaska. When Detective Santos called with the news, Alvarez had dropped everything and driven through the night from Anchorage. "Can I see her?" Alvarez asked Dr. Foster outside Claire's room. "She's not speaking to anyone," the doctor warned, "and I'm not sure if seeing you will help or hurt. You represent that entire chapter of her life, the investigation, the suspicion, everything that came after. I need to tell her I'm sorry," Alvarez said quietly, "for not finding her, for suspecting her husband, for giving up." Dr. Foster studied the retired detective's face and saw genuine anguish there. 5 minutes. "But if she shows any signs of distress, you leave immediately." Alvarez entered the room slowly, giving Claire time to register her presence. The woman in the bed bore little resemblance to the smiling face from the missing person posters. Claire was gaunt, her cheekbones sharp beneath papery skin, her once vibrant blonde hair now long and colorless. But her eyes, those pale blue eyes, tracked Alvarez's movement across the room. "Hello, Claire," Alvarez said, pulling a chair close to the bed but not too close. "My name is Sarah Alvarez. I was the detective who worked your case back in 2017. Her voice caught. I'm so sorry we didn't find you." Claire's eyes remained fixed on Alvarez's face, but she didn't respond. "I looked for you," Alvarez continued. "For months I looked. I interviewed everyone on your street, including—" She paused, the bitter irony not lost on her. "Including Gerald Myers, multiple times. He seemed so concerned, so helpful. He even joined the search parties." She laughed bitterly. "All while you were right there, 30 yards from your own house." A single tear rolled down Claire's cheek. Alvarez leaned forward slightly. "Your children are safe. Your husband, Mark, he raised them well. They're teenagers now. Emma is 15, Jake is 13. Mark moved them to Oregon in 2019, tried to give them a fresh start. They've been notified that you're alive. Mark is on his way here now." At the mention of her children's names, something flickered in Claire's eyes. Not quite recognition. She was still too deep in her trauma for that. But a stirring, like something waking after a long hibernation. "I won't ask you what happened in there," Alvarez said. "Not now, maybe not ever. That's for you to decide if and when you're ready. But I want you to know, you're safe now. Gerald Myers is dead. He can never hurt you again. And we're going to make sure you have every resource, every support you need to heal." Claire's lips moved slightly, forming words that had no sound. Alvarez waited, barely breathing. Claire's voice was barely a whisper, rusty and broken. "My babies. And they're not babies anymore," Alvarez said gently. "But they're still yours, and they never stop missing you." Claire closed her eyes, and more tears came. Silent, endless tears for 6 years of stolen life. Mark Thompson arrived at the hospital on May 4th. He was 43 now, his brown hair graying at the temples, his face lined with the weight of single parenthood and unresolved grief. When Detective Santos called to tell him Claire was alive, he had thought it was a cruel prank. It was only after seeing the news coverage, after having it confirmed by 3 different officials, that he allowed himself to believe. "I don't know if I should see her," Mark said to Dr. Foster in the hospital corridor. "I remarried 2 years ago. My kids, they have a stepmom now, Jennifer. She's been good to them, helped them heal. And now," he pressed his hands against his eyes. "What do I tell them? How do I explain that their mother is alive?" But he gestured helplessly toward Claire's room. "I can't make that decision for you," Dr. Foster said, "but I can tell you that Claire asked about her children. That's the only thing she's asked about." Mark stood outside Claire's room for 10 minutes before finally entering. She was awake, staring at the window, her skeletal hands resting on top of the blanket. When she heard the door open, she turned, and for a moment, Something almost like recognition crossed her face. "Claire," Mark said, his voice breaking. "It's me. It's Mark." She studied him as if he were a stranger, which in many ways he was. They were both different people now, reshaped by trauma, by time, by the impossible situation thrust upon them. "I thought you were dead," Mark said, pulling the chair close to her bed. "For 6 years I thought you were dead. I mourned you. The kids mourned you. We built a memorial in the backyard, planted a tree." He stopped, overwhelmed. "Jake," Claire whispered. "Emma, they're okay," Mark assured her. "They're good kids, strong. They got your strength." He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo. Emma and Jake at the beach last summer, both tanned and smiling. "This is them. Do you want to see?" Claire's hand trembled as she reached for the phone. She stared at the photo for a long time, her fingers tracing the screen as if she could reach through it and touch them. "They want to see you," Mark said. "But I need to know. Are you ready for that? Because they've been through so much, Claire. They've built lives without you. And if you come back into their lives, I need to know you can—" He struggled to find the right words. "That I can be their mother?" Claire said, her voice stronger now, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been grief. "I don't know, Mark. I don't know if I can be anyone's anything anymore." It was the most she had spoken since her rescue. Over the following weeks, Claire's physical condition slowly improved. She gained weight, though she would never fully recover the healthy frame she'd had before her captivity. She underwent hours of physical therapy to rebuild her atrophied muscles. She learned to walk again, to stand without assistance, to perform the basic functions of daily life that had been taken from her. But the psychological recovery was slower, more complicated. The nightmares were relentless. The panic attacks came without warning. Certain sounds, footsteps on stairs, the creak of a ladder, sent her into catatonic states that could last for hours. Dr. Foster brought in specialists from around the country, trauma experts, psychologists who had worked with prisoners of war, with hostages, with survivors of long-term captivity. They all agreed. Claire Thompson's case was extraordinary in its duration and its psychological complexity. 6 years in near-total isolation, Dr. Marcus Chen, a specialist in extreme trauma, explained to the medical team. No natural light, minimal human interaction, complete loss of autonomy. It's a wonder she's functional at all. The human mind wasn't designed to withstand that level of deprivation. The investigation into Gerald Myers' life revealed more horrors. Forensic teams tore apart his former residence, searching for evidence of previous victims. They found traces, hair samples that didn't match Claire's, scratches on the hidden compartment's walls that predated her captivity, a journal hidden in the basement workshop that detailed Myers's projects going back 20 years. At least 3 other women had likely been held in that same space before Claire. Their bodies were never found, but dental records and DNA evidence pointed to missing persons cases from 1998, 2005, and 2012. All were women in their 30s. All had disappeared without a trace from the Fairbanks area. All had reminded Gerald Myers of his late wife, Margaret. The revelation sparked a media firestorm. How had Myers operated for so long without detection? How many times had police come close but missed the signs? The Fairbanks Police Department faced intense scrutiny, and several cold cases were reopened with fresh eyes. Detective Alvarez, despite being retired, felt the weight of each revelation. She had interviewed Myers multiple times. She had stood on his porch. She had accepted his offer of tea, and she had missed everything. "You couldn't have known," Detective Santos told her over coffee one afternoon. "He was a master manipulator, a sociopath with decades of practice. You did everything right. Except find her," Alvarez said bitterly. "I was standing 30 yards from where she was being held and I didn't see it. Neither did anyone else, not in 20 years. But the guilt remained." In June 2023, 2 months after her rescue, Claire was transferred to a specialized rehabilitation facility in Anchorage. The facility, Aurora Heights, specialized in extreme trauma cases and offered round-the-clock care in a secure, therapeutic environment. Mark brought the children to visit on a warm Saturday afternoon. Emma was tall now, nearly as tall as her father, with Claire's blonde hair and determined chin. Jake had Mark's build, but Claire's eyes, the same pale blue that had once sparkled with life and now held depths of pain no child should understand. They met in a private garden on the facility's grounds. Claire sat on a bench, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She had gained 30 pounds since her rescue but still looked fragile, breakable. "Mom," Emma said, the word strange on her tongue after so many years. Claire looked up, and for the first time since her rescue, she smiled. It was a small smile, tentative and sad, but it was real. "You're so tall," Claire whispered. "Both of you. You were so small. I don't really remember you," Jake said bluntly, with the honesty of a 13-year-old. "I was only 7. "I know," Claire said. "That's okay." Emma sat on the bench beside her mother, leaving space between them, but present. "We thought you were dead. Dad said you were probably in heaven watching over us." "I'm sorry," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to come home. I tried so hard to come home." "It wasn't your fault," Mark said firmly, standing behind the children. "None of this was your fault, Claire." They stayed for an hour, the conversation halting and awkward but necessary. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged her mother carefully as if she might break. Jake shook her hand, still uncertain how to navigate this impossible situation. "Can we come back?" Emma asked. "Anytime you want," Claire said. "I'm not going anywhere." The legal ramifications of Claire's case stretched on for months. Although Gerald Myers was dead, his estate faced multiple lawsuits from the families of the other suspected victims. The Fairbanks Police Department settled with Mark Thompson for their failure to discover Claire during the initial investigation. David and Emma Chen, the couple who had found her, became reluctant heroes, praised in the media but haunted by the knowledge that someone had suffered so terribly in their home. Claire herself refused to speak to reporters. She declined book deals, movie offers, and countless interview requests. She wanted only to heal, to rebuild some semblance of a life from the ruins of her captivity. By December 2023, she had made remarkable progress. She could sleep through the night without medication. She could be in a room with the door closed. She had started reading again, cautiously at first, then voraciously, consuming the 6 years of stories she had missed. She would never return to her old life. That was impossible. But slowly, carefully, she was building a new one. She saw her children every other weekend. The visits became easier, more natural. Emma started calling her mom without hesitation. Jake began to remember small things. The way she used to sing while cooking, the lavender smell of her perfume. Mark remained respectful but distant. His new wife, Jennifer, had been understanding but firm. She would support Mark's relationship with Claire for the children's sake, but she was the mother who had raised them through their grief. Claire understood and accepted this. In March 2024, exactly 7 years after her abduction, Claire gave her first and only interview. It was conducted by a respected journalist, known for her sensitivity with trauma survivors. The interview was published in the Atlantic Monthly under the title, "After the Darkness, Claire Thompson's Journey." In it, Claire spoke carefully about her captivity, not the details which were too painful to revisit, but the psychological experience of losing herself and finding a way back. "I thought about my children every day," Claire said in the interview. "In the beginning, I would mentally review every memory I had of them. Their births, their first words, their favorite toys. I was terrified I would forget, that the darkness would take even those memories from me. But they remained. They kept me alive." When asked about forgiveness, Claire paused for a long time. "I don't forgive Gerald Myers," she said finally. "I don't think I ever will, but I've stopped letting him define me. He took 6 years of my life, but he doesn't get to take the rest of it. That's mine. That's the only revenge I need." The article went viral, touching millions of people who saw in Claire's story both the depths of human cruelty and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. By 2025, Claire had moved into her own apartment in Anchorage. She worked part-time at a nonprofit that supported trafficking survivors and missing persons' families. She attended therapy twice a week. She had learned to drive again, though she still experienced panic attacks in snowstorms. She would never be the person she was before January 12, 2017. That Claire Thompson was gone, lost to the darkness of Gerald Myers' attic. But the woman who emerged was stronger in ways that only survival could forge. She had learned that the human spirit, even when bent to its breaking point, had the capacity to heal. Not completely, not without scars, but enough to keep living, enough to find moments of joy and sunrise, in laughter, in her children's faces. On January 12, 2025, 8 years after her abduction, Claire stood on the shore of Kachemak Bay and watched the sun set over the water. The sky burned orange and pink, reflecting off the ice-crusted waves. It was cold, but she didn't mind. After 6 years in darkness, she would never take light for granted again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Love you, Mom. Proud of you every day. Claire smiled. A real smile, full and genuine, and typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart. See you this weekend." She slipped the phone into her pocket and turned her face to the dying light. She was alive. She was free. And for today, that was enough.